National, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, the first edition of the National Information Systems Security Strategy for the period 2025-2029, approved by the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has been published. As tension has been running high in the Middle East in the wake of the U.S.-Israeli joint airstrikes on Iran, the head of the UN High Commission for Human Rights, Volker Turk, says he is deeply shocked by the impact of the war on civilians and infrastructure. The UN Office for Coordination of Human Rights, OCHA, has warned that the regional escalation has a direct impact on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Hello and welcome on Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Salmani. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has congratulated the national military athletics team, which secured first and second places in two disciplines during the military cross-country championship organized in Trikala, Greece. The President extended his warmest congratulations to the national military athletes for securing first and second places in two disciplines among 38 countries participating in the military cross-country championship in Greece, expressing his hope for further achievements. The delegate minister to the Minister of National Defense and Army Chief of Staff, Army General Said Chengriha, also congratulated the national military cross-country team on its first and place victory or team victory, praising the athletes' honorable results and wishing them success in representing Algeria at the international competitions. As you followed in our top stories, the Information Systems Security Agency of the Ministry of National Defense has published the first edition of the National Information Systems Security Strategy for the period 2025-2029, approved by the President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, Minister of National Defense, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. The National Information Systems Security Strategy constitutes a comprehensive framework aimed at ensuring national cyber resilience and protecting the state's digital infrastructure and data. It also aims to protect citizens from threats evolving in cyberspace, in particular through the strategic orientation aimed at accelerating the process of digital transformation in all state institutions. It also represents a roadmap for preserving national digital sovereignty, ensuring the continuity of essential public services, and strengthening the citizens' confidence in the state's digital environment. The Secretary-General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Lunas Megaraman, has received the Assistant State Secretary for Foreign Affairs of the Swiss Confederation in charge of the Middle East and North Africa, Ms. Monika Schmutz-Kirkoz, as part of the working visit she is carrying out in Algeria. The meeting was an opportunity to address the relations of cooperation and partnership existing between Algeria and Switzerland in several fields. The two parties also exchanged views on the main regional and international issues. Now, the Arab Interparliamentary Union has affirmed that it is following with deep concern the serious security developments in the Middle East region, calling for the urgent resumption of the Iranian-American relations or negotiations with a view to reaching a peaceful settlement of the crisis to safeguard regional security and stability. Masoud Sharfi has the details.
In a statement, the Speaker of the People's National Assembly, APN, Brahim Bughali, deplored the deadlock in the Iranian-American talks hosted by the Sultanate of Oman, stressing that this initiative had raised real hopes for prioritizing a diplomatic path and sparing the region the risks of an open military confrontation with unpredictable consequences. The AIPU also condemned the primacy given to the military option at the expense of dialogue, reaffirming the Union's categorical rejection of any resource to force to settle disputes, which must be resolved by peaceful means in accordance with the United Nations Charter and the international law's principles. It also reiterated the organization's constant attachment to the respect for the sovereignty and integrity of Arab states, as well as its rejection of any infringement on their security and stability, expressing its full solidarity with the concerned countries.
As tension has been running as tension has been running high in the Middle East in the wake of the U.S.-Israeli joint airstrikes on Iran. The head of the UN High Commission for Human Rights, Volker Turk, says he is deeply shocked by the impact of the war on civilians and infrastructure. The UN High Commissioner urged all the parties to show moderation to avert any new escalation and to take all possible measures to protect the civilians. His spokesperson, Ravina Shamdasani, recalled that the attacks targeting civilians or civilian goods as well as indiscriminate attacks constituted serious violations of the international humanitarian law and could be described as war crimes. The UN High Commissioner called on the parties to show wisdom and to put an end to violence, advocating the return to the negotiating table as the sole means of putting a halt to massacres, destruction, and despair. According to the Iranian Red Crescent, over 780 people have been killed since the U.S.-Israeli raids were launched on the country 4 days ago. The attack, estimated at over 1,000, hit 153 cities and more than 500 sites. The attacks targeted or triggered off many or a reaction denouncing the latest developments in the Middle East and fearing an extension of the conflict. Algeria's representative to the UN office in Geneva, Rashid Bladhan, expressed concerns at the deteriorating situation in the Middle East and advocated dialogue and peaceful solution to solve the crisis.
Algeria is following with great concern the recent developments taking place in the Middle East, particularly in the wake of stumbling of negotiations conducted within the framework of the mediation carried out by the Sultanate of Oman between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States of America, and the ensuing military escalation with unpredictable consequences. While Algeria regrets this dangerous trend, it calls on all parties to show a maximum restraint, uphold a spirit of responsibility, and privilege peace solutions and dialogue in accordance with the spirit and objectives of the United Nations Charter and the principles of international law. Algeria also expresses its full solidarity with the brotherly Arab countries that have been affected by military attacks and categorically rejects any infringement on the national sovereignty of these brotherly countries, their territorial integrity, as well as the security of their peoples.
It is worth recalling that the International Atomic Energy Agency held a special meeting devoted to the military escalation in the Gulf. It was held at the request of both Iran and Russia. The Israeli occupying authorities have authorized the army to take control of new positions in Lebanon, where it is conducting a campaign of airstrikes in parallel with the ongoing war against Iran. Mariam Barshi has more.
According to Lebanon's national news agency, any new Israeli strikes targeted the southern suburbs of Beirut without prior evacuation warnings. And he reported that the series of violent strikes caused significant damage to buildings. The United Nations stated that the conflict has displaced at least 31,000 people in Lebanon so far. A spokesperson for the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, reported significant population movements in parts of southern Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley in eastern Lebanon, and the southern suburbs of Beirut following intensive Israeli airstrikes in these three regions. The Israeli occupying forces has been carrying out a large-scale bombing campaign in Lebanon since Monday. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights expressed concern over the escalating hostilities and called on all parties to immediately halt the violence and respect the ceasefire agreement reached in 2024. Lebanon is the first country where humanitarian actors have begun responding to large-scale displacement linked to the current escalation. On Monday, the government activated emergency shelters, enabling aid organizations to distribute hot meals and ready-to-eat food to support displaced families.
Still in the Middle East, the UN Office for the Coordination of Human Rights, OCHA, has warned that the regional escalation has a direct impact on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. It stressed that the restrictions imposed on the Palestinian territory hamper the population's access to food, fuel, and medicine. This came as the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged for the reopening as soon as possible of all crossing points to maintain a sustainable flow of supplies.
As you know, Israeli authorities have closed all crossings, including Rafah, and have suspended humanitarian movements in and near areas where Israeli troops remain deployed in Gaza, and they've also postponed planned rotation for our humanitarian personnel. Medical evacuations and the return of people into Gaza have also been suspended as a result. People in Gaza, as you know, rely on a steady flow of humanitarian commercial goods from outside, given the limited storage capacity and destruction across this war-torn area. We and our partners had worked hard to maintain sustained and predictable flow of supplies despite the continuing restrictions, but that cannot continue under full blockade. It is imperative that all crossings be reopened as soon as possible.
That was the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres' spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric. Meanwhile, the Israeli occupying authorities have imposed restrictions on the access to the West Bank towns of Qalqilia, Bethlehem and Tulkarem. They have been tightening their grip on the West Bank in a clear attempt to reinforce their control over the Palestinian territory. Now to Sudan, where the Sudan Doctors Network has announced that 12 people were injured, including 5 medical staff, as a result of a drone strike by the Rapid Support paramilitary forces targeting the British hospital in the city of El Obeid, the capital of North Kordofan state in central Sudan. More with Mariam Barshi.
The Sudan Doctors Network condemned this blatant attack on the British hospitals, stressing that it constitutes a serious violation of international humanitarian law, which guarantees the protection of medical facilities and their staff and endangers the lives of patients and healthcare personnel. In addition to the Darfur region, the 3 Kordofan states, North, West and South, are witnessing violent clashes between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support paramilitary forces. The United Nations Secretary-General spokesman Stéphane Dujarric has expressed concern about the continuing violence in the region.
Where we continue to be very worried over the escalating violence in the states of Kordofan and Blue Nile, where intensified fighting continues to harm civilians, and with it disrupting the delivery of much-needed humanitarian and life-saving assistance. According to local sources, drone attacks have intensified in El Obeid, the capital of North Kordofan, since last Friday. Meanwhile, in South Kordofan, clashes continue in and around Dilling. Fighting along key supply routes continue to disrupt commercial traffic and humanitarian operations. In Blue Nile State, there have been intensive drone attacks in the town of Kurmuk over the past 2 weeks. A school was allegedly destroyed while electricity station was damaged. We call on all parties to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure, ensure rapid and unhindered humanitarian access, and uphold international humanitarian law. Sustained, flexible funding is urgently needed to maintain life-saving services and prevent further deterioration.
Since April 2023, Sudan has been facing an armed conflict between the army and the Rapid Support paramilitary forces, which has caused famine in one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world, the death of tens of thousands of Sudanese, and the displacement of around 13 million people.
Now, in South Sudan, at least 169 people have been killed in an attack carried out by armed men on a village in a remote area in the north of the country. More in this report by Masoud Shafi.
The information officer for Ruang Administrative Area, James Munalwalk, told media outlets that dozens of armed men had set fire to market areas and homes in the area. According to the United Nations mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, 1,000 people sought refuge at its base there after the attack. Recently, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, called for an urgent action in South Sudan, noting that 189 civilians were documented killed in January, with a 45% 25% increase in human rights violations and assaults compared to the previous month. The United Nations had previously warned of a volatile situation in South Sudan, where renewed fighting in Jonglei state has displaced hundreds of thousands of civilians in recent weeks, damaged healthcare infrastructure, and fueled the spread of cholera. Clashes between forces loyal to President Salva Kiir and former Deputy Riek Machar, which resumed in late December, have displaced nearly 280,000 people in 8 countries, many of whom fled to Upper Nile and Lake states.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. This is the English service. We're coming live to you from the capital, Algiers. The United Nations Under-Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, said that the world is facing the highest number of armed conflicts since World War II, and that the number of children killed in these conflicts is the highest in decades. According to the UN News Center, DiCarlo affirmed during a meeting held by the UN Security Council on Children, Technology and Education in Conflict that the best way to protect children from conflicts is to prevent and end wars, noting that 1 in every 5 children lives in or has fled from a conflict zone.
Globally, 1 in every 5 children is living in or fleeing a conflict zone. This adds up to 473 million children. Grave violations against children, verified by the United Nations, increased by a staggering 25% from 2023 to 2024. Rape and other forms of sexual violence rose by 35%. These horrific figures should impel us to do more to protect children in conflict. When conflicts do not rob children of their life and physical security, they deprive them of the right to have a quality education and a future of opportunities. 234 million children in crisis and conflict situations currently need educational support. 85 million are completely out of school. In violent conflicts, schools can be one of the only safe spaces that protect children from recruitment, trafficking, and exploitation.
That was the United Nations Under-Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, who also said that children are among the most affected by conflicts, referring to Security Council Resolution 2601, which urges all parties to immediately halt attacks on schools, children, and teachers, and to protect, respect, and promote the right to education. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. Stay tuned.